The ripple effects of the government shutdown, not to mention a potential debt default in the making, are being felt around the world. Now, here to talk more about this is Daniel Levin. He is with a board member of the Liechtenstein Foundation for State Governments. Thank you so much for joining us here on the show. We've heard this all day. There have been a lot of new developments. Who around the world should be watching? Why should they care?
Who should not be watching is probably the better question. I mean, it really impacts everybody. You have the U.S. dollar as a global reserve currency. You mentioned earlier the numbers. The U.S. Treasuries held in China 1.6 trillion, Japan 1.1 trillion. But people forget, or some people in Congress may perhaps forget, that every day 500 billion U.S. dollar treasuries change hands. Every day 500 billion. These are securities that are used, for example, by banks to fund their short-term lending needs. I mean, everything really can collapse. So I think the whole world is looking at the United States, obviously China foremost, not quite understanding why this is a man-made disaster that's happening.
We're seeing these effects instantaneously. We're watching the markets, but how soon does the United States see other countries pulling back or making decisions to maybe change the way they do business with the United States, taking their money out of the U.S.?
I think it's a gradual process because nobody would be suicidal to just liquidate U.S. Treasury holdings overnight because they would devalue the value of their remaining holdings. I think the intelligence strategy is probably one that China is currently pursuing is double track on the one hand to gradually decrease the percentage of U.S. assets in their foreign exchange reserves. China has done that over the last 4 years. It's gone down by more than 20%, from about 70% to below 50% now, which is a pretty sizable difference. And at the same time also to start to challenge whether the US dollar should be the dominant international reserve currency. And obviously as China is internationalizing the renminbi, that is a very gradual process. It's still just the 8th largest one. So this is a long process to take. But I think this is a double track that China is going to pursue and many countries are going to follow suit.
We've had two very recent developments in the situation today. The most recent, of course, the House Republicans canceling a vote tonight. But just prior to that, the credit agency Fitch gave the United States a rating watch negative. What do you make of that, and how should that be seen?
I mean, there's a financial impact to that, obviously, just like there was one when S&P's downgraded the U.S. 2 years ago from AAA to AA+, and it triggered a reaction. The spreads on credit default swaps will change. I mean, there is a financial impact immediately. But I think this is a political crisis before it's a financial economic crisis. I don't think anyone debate that. Just like the Eurozone crisis is a political crisis. There's plenty of money in Europe to fund the debt in the Eurozone. The question is simply how do you spread the pain? And to some extent, that's really what's happening here. Just like the debate is whether Germany will just swallow the pill and fund that debt, or whether the poorer countries in Europe will have to essentially accept austerity that's imposed. It's a very similar debate that's happening here. It's a political crisis, and unfortunately it's happening at a moment of lack of political leadership. I don't think anyone would debate that.
All right, Daniel Levin, we appreciate your time and your insight as always. Thank you so much for joining us here on the show.